Hello, friends, and welcome to What the Fringe, the podcast dedicated to all things Fringe theater. I'm your host, Lauren Hantz. Each week, I visit with a Fringe artist to hear all about their endeavors and gain insight into their process. This week, I'm visiting with Alexander Gerchak of Clevername Theatre. Recently, Clevername Theatre has taken famed works of serious theater, Edward Albee's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Bertolt Brecht's Mother Courage and Her Children, and has parodied them with icons of our nostalgic youth, such as Winnie the Pooh and the Care Bears, respectively, to bizarre effect. To complete the triptych of such works, Clevername will tackle the singular Eugene O'Neill with the very essence of youth, Peter Pan, aptly titled The Peter Pan Cometh, which places the Iceman Cometh in Neverland for an absurd contrast of O'Neill's nihilistic worldview against the whimsy of Peter Pan. A pirate, his first mate, and a fairy all bury their woes in a mountain of pixie dust. They dreamed of a life outside of their Neverland, of a place they could never reach. Then along came Peter.
And the big question was, how do these themes relate to the themes happening in Peter Pan, which is very much revolves around ideas of youth, ideas of growing up, ideas of what happens when you're not able to grow up. Thinking about Peter Pan and this core idea of Peter's arrested development being something that he is unable to get over. And part of that is he creates this massive delusion in his mind about being able to grow up and having some kind of false epiphany that he thinks has freed him when in fact it has entrapped him, was the marriage of those themes. And really the larger goal then is to try to portray that and to essentially take the themes of Iceman Cometh and to put them in an entirely new lens that makes it all the more relatable and really gives it that heart that you're looking for.
Alexander Gerchak has been performing and directing in the Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota area for over a decade. Alexander is a former board member of the Gilbert and Sullivan Very Light Opera Company and is a founding member of Clevername Theatre, a loose collective of artists based in the Twin Cities. Some of Alexander's directing credits with Clevername Theatre include Twelfth Night, and he has written and directed A Bear, Mother Courage and Her Children, Who's Afraid of Winnie the Pooh, and The Peter Pan Cometh. Alexander, welcome to What the Fringe.
Hello. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I was telling you before we went on air that I was very much looking forward to having you on the program this year because I fangirl about your writing like super hard. I'm going to tell you a story because we met at the Minnesota Fringe in 24, and I don't think I've told you this story. So I saw the Peter Pan Cometh. It was one of the first shows I saw at the festival, and I was blown away. Absolutely loved it. The writing, I was obsessing over. And so I told a friend of mine, I was like, oh my gosh, the writing was so good. And he goes, oh, that guy over there, he's the guy that wrote it. And this is important, you had a salmon color shirt on. And I was like, oh, I gotta go meet him. I was like, hi, I'm like, you're so great. And you were like, nice to meet you. And, went on about your business. And I was like, I met the writer. And then I think it had to have been later that day. I think I had my show, and I interact with the audience and I can see everybody. And at some point in the show, I looked up and I saw your salmon colored shirt. And I for a half a second freaked out so bad. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the guy that I like his writing. I really hope he doesn't think my writing sucks. And then I was like, get out of your head, get back in your show. And I did. But there's been a very few times that I got very nervous, and you was sitting in the audience was one of them. That's why you're here, because I just absolutely love you. And then we got to hang out, and I bummed lots of rides after you. And anyway, we had a good time. So there's my embarrassing story. You're turning bright red.
Oh, that's funny. Well, and I feel very bad. The last thing I'd want to do is to cause panic on stage.
It was your salmon shirt. It wasn't you. It was a salmon shirt.
I'll say that you had nothing to worry about. I enjoyed the production quite a bit when you came through town. So
thank you so much. I am just so excited to have you here. So let's talk about you and Clevername and all the wonderful art that you're doing. So let's first start about Clevername Theater. Who makes up the company and how did you guys start? Because you are now kind of like this full-fledged theater company running in Minnesota there, doing lots of productions every year. So where did you begin?
You know, it was way back in 2015. A friend of mine and one of the founding members of the company, he had written a production that was an adaptation of Herman Melville's Bartleby the Scrivener, but wanted to make that a musical, naturally. Because, I mean, what else are you going to do with Bartleby the Scrivener? Clearly musical potential. Actually, one of my favorite shows that we ever got to do. And we went ahead and we staged that. And that was our first production that we produced at the Minnesota Fringe. It had a good amount of success and we were satisfied with it. And at that point, it was first just a couple of us getting together and talking, being like, well, you know, is this something we want to try to do every year and that sort of thing? And we then brought in a couple more folks until we had about a half dozen people that comprise of those founding members of Clevername, where we, by and large, stage a show every year at the Minnesota Fringe. And once we started doing that a couple years and kind of got ourselves under our feet, we decided, well, you know, what would we want to do next? What's the next thing? And start to build on that until 10 years later have whatever we have now.
Are all those founding members still there, that like half dozen folks?
Yes. Really, the core of our company is 6 people. And we sort of have de facto roles, but we also have a very multi-talented group of people that tend to do all kinds of things. So a number of the members are our primary designers. We have our costume designer and our lighting designer and so forth. But then those people at the same time are doing other projects. They may be directing a show, or we have a couple of playwrights in the company. So they'll be producing material for the show. That really serves as a strong foundation for us to be able to consistently put up work throughout the year.
That's so great. And then how many of your actors, do you have a company of actors? I can't remember. I know you work with sometimes like similar people, but were some of them founding as well? Or was it more of kind of like on the production end?
Well, it depends. Some of us act sometimes. Some of us do not like to be on the stage. So very rarely we do. But then we also have, I'd say, like a close corral of folks that we've gotten to meet over the years and begin to collaborate with. So you'll see a lot of familiar faces if you happen to live in our area and see our shows. But we also, as a matter of policy, really try to expand out and to work as many new people as possible. So it's important for us to be able to hold open auditions and to keep that connection with the community, because really the more people we work with, the stronger the work is. So we really enjoy that part of it as well, of not only being able to build a rapport or a relationship with a lot of the artisans and performers and musicians in the Twin Cities, but also being able to grow that to a certain extent.
That's wonderful that you do that, because some companies, I mean, just anywhere, whatever city you're in, whether you're in the Twin Cities, I'm in Houston, or, you know, you can feel like, oh, they only work with the same people over and over. And it is nice to hear those people that are running the companies going, no, we're very intentional about bringing new folks in and giving new people opportunities. So I'm glad that you guys have a kind of set way of doing that. So that's great.
It tends to be one of the biggest barriers as well when you're a new artist, right? Like this is something that I hear a lot from folks, is that maybe they move to a new city, right? Or they're just getting their start, and they'll find, especially in the smaller mid-sized areas like the Twin Cities or where you're at, where you try to get in, but everything's very insular. It's very siloed. Everyone has their people, and it's very hard to break into that. So being able to try to create a platform where people are able to make those connections, I think really strengthens the community overall.
Well said, well said. So for Clevername, how would you categorize what you all do? Because I've noticed that you do tend to focus on kind of more classic works, if you will, even some of the things that you've staged that aren't original work. And then your original work a lot of your original work is based on some very classic theater, and it is really fascinating. I've never seen anything like it. So how would you categorize yourself, I guess?
There's a couple things that we try to consistently do. We try to do works that tend to be satirical. So something that has more bite, something that has more of a perspective or a point of view to cast light on certain things, right? And we tend to do comedies. Every once in a while we'll do a drama, but we really do enjoy having things that have sort of a darker, sardonic wit to it. And I think as well, to your point, doing works that either pay homage or allusion to sort of those foundational classical works has been a through line for our company for, the vast majority of the time. But we also tend to not make a mockery of them, but, it's a little sacrilegious, right? Like our most recent show, I don't know if a lot of Eugene O'Neill fans would be super pumped about it. Maybe they would love it. I don't know. So there is both a love and also an irreverence for the theater that came before, and trying to bring new facets of it to light is kind of part of the fun challenge.
Yeah, I got that when I saw the Peter Pan Cometh. It never felt like a mockery by any means, or that was never any kind of feeling that I got from your work. It felt very honoring to the work and very playful. And I think it's because you'd kind of delve into deeper things. I know you guys bill yourself as a comedy, but it's very deep. It's very thoughtful and, has stuff to say. So your background is in theater. When did you decide that you loved directing and you loved writing and all of that? Because you also sing, because you've sung in there at the Gilbert and Sullivan. When did you discover that you liked writing and directing?
It feels relatively late in the game for me in a lot of ways. Because, growing up, I did the typical theater kid stuff. From 8, I was doing musicals, and I was singing in the choir and playing instruments. And I did the dance studio thing, ballet, jazz, all of that. But it wasn't really until I got into a college environment that did not do musicals, that was not big on, big showy showstopper kind of material, that I began to broaden a little bit, and then had an opportunity or two to be able to direct and to have more control over the larger production. And I think that put, that seed in there to be more interested in being able to shepherd a project from start to finish, which is probably the most fulfilling part of being able to direct a production. And I think in terms of the writing, that was also in part a bit of a pragmatic transition. There's a certain need to have material that you don't have to pay rights for, that you have a certain amount of control over, and so someone has to write the thing. And there's a handful of folks in the company that writes. By and large, if we're doing a production, it's either going to be written by myself or by Connor McAvoy. Between the two of us, we've written a fair amount, and a large part of that really does come down to, well, what are we doing in the fall? I don't know. We need something, and we do not have money to put up 42nd Street or whatever it is. So, but that's the joy of a small company, right? Is that the parameters that force you to complete something when it's a creative project really enforces and informs it. So as a result of that, I've gotten to write a fair amount of things, and it's been a lot of fun.
And that's the thing I love about Fringe, is because you do get to see all of this new innovative work, and Minnesota's done a great job of kind of nurturing the artists, kind of the local artists there. I've been so impressed with how many companies like yourself have kind of blossomed out of that and found their voice and continued to grow and then contribute there to the theatrical community. It's really, really exciting. So you were kind of getting into your process that you write and Connor writes. So what is that process like for you all? How does that work? And how does that work for you? Do you bring people in, or do you think about your actors? There's so many questions there. So just kind of walk me through that.
There will be stop and starts, right? In terms of thinking about projects you might want to tackle, various inspiration, that sort of thing. I've found that There'll be any number of like a dozen or 24 ideas that might pop up in your head over the course of a year. And it's like, well, maybe that might be a fun idea, right? And then you spend the course of that year, and the 2 or 3 ideas that you haven't been able to get out of your head tend to be the winners, right? We'll think of a handful of ideas that we're really excited about, and we'll get together as a company and discuss, we'll make proposals and that sort of thing to decide, well, which of these would we really want to move forward with? And what does that schedule look like? What does the budget look like? So on and so forth, right? So we're setting those parameters. We're getting a good sense of what we can do. And once we've made a decision on a project, at that point, the horses are off, right? We're trying to figure out in how short of a period we can complete it, and then usually aiming for some either festival or spot in the season as an end date. Writing process is relatively short. We may write a script in as short as a month to 3 months in order to keep up with the schedule. And then from there, at the same time, you're planning for auditions, you're planning for venue assignment, you're planning for doing all of the sort of producer pieces that need to be completed in the meantime. Now, we've tried to slow things down a little bit in the past few years because we used to have a production schedule for any given show that from idea to curtain was about 6 months. So when you're working the fringe circuit or something like that, that's certainly a lot more manageable, but it is a breakneck pace, especially if you're developing the material like the script or the libretto out of cloth, right? And then jumping right into it. We staged a number of musicals in our earlier years, and after doing that about 3 or 4 years, it became apparent that we'll need a little more time. So that's always kind of an ongoing project of really figuring out that management piece and giving enough time for these things to come to fruition. But the speed also really kind of helps that adrenaline of getting things going.
And then how do you develop these scripts that are these little mashups, right? Of these classic stories and then these kind of children's stories. How much of that, like, do you take the original script and then take the ideas from the children's story? Like, how's that working together?
It's funny because it can depend entirely on the particular show, right? Like when we started, the past few years doing essentially these parodies of great theatrical works, quote unquote, right? For the very first one, the genesis of that literally started just in a random dressing room where we were doing this other show, and a bunch of the, actors just sitting around waiting for their entrance, spitballing about stuff. And at some point, we were making a joke about different ways to stage shows, and someone uttered the phrase, "Who's afraid of Winnie the Pooh?" And literally from that, and that just sticking in the head and be like, oh, that's funny, but oh, maybe there's legs there. Maybe there's some kind of bizarro world where that's actually stageable. And then it started freaking me out the more and more I looked into it, and the more the pieces kind of fell into place in a weird, macabre fashion. So, sometimes it happens like that. And then sometimes for, sort of the spiritual follow-ups of that show, it's a lot more intentional, where we are sitting down, we're doing a little more research, and maybe you have like a dozen or so different proposals for different ideas, and then you end up with 1 or 2 of them that you decide that, these are the strongest, let's go ahead and greenlight this, and then you run with that as far as it will take you.
Well, it pays off. It's wonderful. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Peter Pan Cometh, because that's the show that I've seen. So you guys did that in the theater in the round there in Minnesota last year. So you kind of crafted that show, from what I understand, for that space. And it was staged beautifully. It was written beautifully. Obviously, I thought so. The lighting was absolutely stunning, and the costumes, and the set was very simple. I think there was just the round spool and a few chairs. I think that was it. Yes. Or was there anything else? I can't remember.
Yes. Very basic set design. 3 industrial spools. We made those tables, and then 3 tiny miniature spools for seats, and that's it. So very much a fringe set.
Yeah, it was. It's easy to get on and off. You got enough people to do that. And then I think what made it pop was the lighting and then the costuming. The costumes had a very nice, beautiful kind of cohesive look. So you said your lighting designer is someone there who is part of the company, and your costume designer, is she part of the company as well?
Yes, both are members. Grace Barnstead, who does a number of things, is also one of our directors. She's currently directing the production that'll be going up in just a week here in Minnesota. And for the Fringe productions, it can be a little different because that also involves a lot of coordination with the venue techs while you're going through the technical process. So we essentially develop a concept design for the lighting between, Grace and I, and then we bring that to our technicians. And we were very blessed. We had incredibly talented technicians that are able to take those ideas and then apply them in the space, which, I agree, just elevated it so much more. And then Genevieve Kafka, a member as well, and has been our resident costume designer for essentially the whole length of the company's tenure, just has an incredible eye and is very resourceful and was able to really pull together this look of a Neverland that has been sort of abandoned and like time has passed and there is this sort of bedraggled sensibility to it. And then counteracting that with a Peter that decides to show up, and he's in this Edwardian three-piece suit, and it really creates a fun contrast for the audience.
Peter Schuster, a great choice and very fun. And even though he's in this Edwardian costume, like you said, the show's very stylized in that way, but it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. I loved it. I'm not going to spoil it for the people.
If anything else, Peter's entrance is well worth it. Come to see Peter Pan. Show-stopping. I promise.
People are like, does he have a jetpack on? What is he doing? Okay, so you brought in Thomas. I loved Thomas. I do have to talk about him. He was Captain Hook, and then he was Winnie the Pooh. I didn't see him in that, but I saw him in the Peter Pan Cometh, and gosh, he was so engaging and so wonderful. Have you written stuff thinking of him in mind, or is he kind of part of that resident acting company, or how's your relationship with him?
Incredibly strong. And we've had a handful of these performers that we've gotten to work with consistently over the years, and I felt very lucky to do so. And with actors like Thomas Buin, we certainly are looking for opportunities for them to be incorporated in our works and that sort of thing. We're good friends as well, and that plays a big role in it. So that plays a part, at least in some of these productions. For our smaller scale Fringe productions, we tend to reach out to folks that we've worked on pieces in the past, since it's a much shorter rehearsal schedule. And we want to make sure that they're feeling comfortable and that they're going to be able to handle the material. So that plays a role. And knowing those people that we have on hand, I think, does play a role. It's not definitive, but it made us feel a lot more confident in the idea for the Peter Pan Cometh, knowing that we had these people that we could reach out to and would do excellent work. So having Thomas be our Hook, I think, was a huge boon for us, as well as knowing that we had exceptional Peter in our Nick Hill, who has performed with us for a number of years as well, and really sort of epitomized the exact energy that we needed for that production. Same for our Smee in Alec Burcham, who might be one of the most talented physical actors that I've ever gotten to work with, and brings the energy that we need for that production. But then at the same time, we're excited to be able to work with people that we've never gotten to work with before as well. And that is just as fulfilling. For this production, it's a small cast. We only have 4 performers. And then Isabel Hopewell would be the newcomer, hadn't gotten a chance to work with us in the past, and I think really did a beautiful job in terms of bringing sort of a groundedness to this Tinkerbell that really goes throughout the course of the show.
She does go through it, bless it.
It's a bit dark for everyone involved in this production. They're all going through things, but I think Tinkerbell in particular has a time of it, and she really captured that energy. So, and I feel like that's really a big part of why it's so rewarding to be able to do these kind of pieces consistently, is because you're building those relationships with people that you trust inherently, and then you're also able to reach out to new talent and to build those new relationships as well. So one of the really exciting things about Peter Pan is just having a very strong ensemble cast that really sells the material.
Well, you do it very well. And on that, like with the material, how did you kind of come up with the themes that you wanted to explore? I know you've got childhood and you've got nihilism. There's some fun topics. They go together real well. How did you come up with those themes of what you wanted to explore in this piece?
For these past few shows that we've done, this so-called triptych, where we've essentially ruined amazing, cornerstones of theater by injecting childhood, various iconography into them. A big part of these has been being faithful to the original material and to explore the themes that are in play in those plays and how they interact with the themes of, those properties that we're incorporating, right? With the Peter Pan Cometh, you have the Iceman Cometh as your basis. And the main theme of Iceman Cometh is how we as people use delusion in order to cope and in order for us to be able to get past the failures of our lives and to really, essentially grapple with this human condition of having regrets and not being able to do the things that you wanted to do with your life. Light stuff, right? Popcorn kind of material. And the big question was, how do these themes relate to the themes happening in Peter Pan, which is very much revolves around ideas of youth, ideas of growing up, ideas of what happens when you're not able to grow up. Thinking about Peter Pan and this core idea of Peter's arrested development being something that he is unable to get over. And part of that is he creates this massive delusion in his mind about being able to grow up and having some kind of false epiphany that he thinks has freed him when in fact it has entrapped him. Was the marriage of those themes. And really the larger goal then is to try to portray that and to essentially take the themes of Iceman Cometh and to put them in an entirely new lens that makes it all the more relatable and really gives it that heart that you're looking for.
I think one of the things that was so moving was, knowing the story kind of behind Peter Pan and J.M. Barrie. And I think it was like his brother, he lost his brother. And it was this, you take fantasy to kind of keep alive this idea of someone that's gone. And so it was just a very deep, moving piece, even though you mean for it to be a comedy. But I guess that's when it's a really good comedy, right?
I mean, it can be both and, I think that maybe a bit of us, trying to have our cake and eat it too. But I think one of the really fascinating things about these plays has been how you find these connections as you dig a little deeper. In our research, learning more about J.M. Barrie and about his life, how the traumas that he experienced as a youth in terms of, like you said, losing his sibling and some other family difficulties really made a profound impact on his life and at least in his sense, from his perspective, being able to fulfill this role of adult, whatever that meant, and how that informed the rest of his adulthood life, as well as the art that he would create, and that being reflected in Peter Pan. Those really difficult, knotty themes, the amount to which they aligned with the same kind of themes that you would look at in something like The Iceman Cometh is something that you wouldn't anticipate and something that feels entirely counterintuitive. And I think that might be what makes these work at a level that's a little better than just like a standard parody, is that there happens to be these parallels and these connections and these contrasts that really give the audience a chance to stop and think, while also still reveling in just the absurdity of having the characters of Peter Pan being near suicidally depressed, sitting on an abandoned ship, drowning their sorrows in pixie dust. I mean, that's a ridiculous premise that has a lot more meat on the bones than it has any right to be. That's my favorite part of it, is that it has no right making that much sense. And then at the same time, it somehow does. So,
well, and you all do such a great job there too of like not making it overly precious, if you will, because that's where it could go so wrong. You take your work seriously, like the work that you're doing is what you're bringing to the table, but not yourselves and not the work. Like you don't take that so seriously that it becomes precious. And that is a hard balance to find sometimes. And you all do a great job at it. So 2 thumbs up from me.
I'll just add to that briefly that, one of the things that we talk about a lot in the rehearsal room is the idea of paying fidelity to the material by performing it with the same kind of seriousness and the same kind of rigor than if we were doing the actual show. So I think that has helped really make these pieces work at a level that's stronger than, say, if we gave into like the desire to ham or to really, bring a certain level of camp to it or that sort of thing. But then at the same time, the balance then comes with making sure that you're not being so overly pretentious that there is levity and there is fun there. Because no one wants to see an overly serious Iceman Cometh, but it's Peter Pan.
No, nobody wants to see that. What they want to see, they don't even know. What they want to see is what you did. So you did it. Nail on the head, man. All right. So we were coming here close to the end of our interview. So I always like to end with this crazy little question. You've done Fringe here now for a while. You've done Edmonton and Cincy and Minnesota. So I'm sure you've got lots of stories, but what has been your most interesting or awkward Fringe interaction that you've had?
The story that comes to mind first actually has to do, even before Clevername Theater and all of that, more with my youth. Probably a formative moment in my life was that I was lucky enough, in high school, they have these programs where they'll, send off random high schools to perform at the Edinburgh Fringe in the UK, which, is a tremendous privilege and was, again, kind of a formative experience for me, being able to go to that Fringe and just see the scale and the amount of art that's happening and the level of creativity that's involved, right? So very exciting. Now, we did stage a production of the high school musical, which, regrettable for me. Not exactly what I would have wanted us to perform, but it was very popular, right? Because we were just a bunch of high school kids performing this high school musical at the exact same age that you'd want the characters. So people in the UK ate it up, sold all kinds of tickets. It was great. Now, there was a handful of other high schools that would be like in the same group from the same organization that would come and perform. And I remember distinctly that there was another high school that was essentially doing like a more modern adaptation of Aesop's Fables. And apparently their show was not doing quite as well. And the reason that we came to know this is that like a handful of us would be walking the mile in Edinburgh, huge stretch, right? Where everyone's performing, you have all the buskers, everything's going on, everyone's trying to sell their shows. And I will never forget walking past one of the cast members of this Aesop's Fables adaptation. They had their flyers and stuff and posters, and they would just mock at the rest of the crowd. Come see Aesop's Fables, better than High School Musical. Come see Aesop's Fable. Like, they were just like openly trashing our show. That's like the selling point, right? It's like, psh, don't waste your time on little old Moorhead High School. Come see our hot new rendition of Aesop. And that just, I don't know, it's something about that just always stuck with me. I thought that was the funniest thing, because like what are we doing here?
It's like a very high school thing to do, right? Like, oh, those folks over there, we're going to run them into the ground. Blah, blah, blah.
I was not ready for such antagonism, right? And like part of me is like, you want it, you take it, I mean, we'll do swapsies, but thankfully I've found that is the exception to the rule. Usually fringes tend to be a lot more collaborative, but probably one of my favorite moments because it's just so funny. Apparently it gets awful competitive. The knives come out. So
right, they're like, this is all we got. We got to mention these people. That's great. Oh my gosh. Well, Alexander, thank you so much for joining me today on What the Fringe. You made my fangirl dreams come true to talk to a playwright that I admire. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that's very sweet. Thank you. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and this has been a lot of fun. Good.
All right. Well, Clevername Theatre will be returning to the Edmonton Fringe for 2025 to stage the Peter Pan Cometh. And if you really like what they're doing, consider joining Clevername Theatre Patreon for more behind-the-scene looks at their productions and perks, including free tickets. So for more information on their upcoming productions, you can follow Clevername Theatre on Instagram and Facebook at Clevername Theatre. Those links will be in the show description for you. What the Fringe is produced and hosted by me, Lauren Hantz. This episode was edited by Ben Ellis of Renowned Media. Those sweet tunes you hear are provided by Paul Snyder of Orchestra of Sound, and our logo was designed by Ruby Arnold of Ruby Makes Things. What the Fringe can be found on your favorite podcast platforms and now on YouTube. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know when new episodes release. And keep up with What the Fringe on Instagram at whatthefringe_productions and find us online at whatthefringeproductions.com. We all get nervous for the night that a critic comes to our show. Some critics are inclined to say lovely things, while others, you wonder if they even like theater. And you learn who the toughest critic at your Fringe is when
someone uttered the phrase, "Who's afraid of Winnie the Pooh?"